Well, I'm here with my friend Toy Wilson today from Flint Baptist. And Toy, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Well, this is exciting for me because the trip that you went on to Guatemala with Flint Baptist, I was also blessed to be able to be on that trip, and that's where we met. And there were so many things that happened on that trip that I just want to go over a few of those things and kind of talk through them and tell some stories.
Okay, that sounds great.
So, had you been on a mission trip before?
This was my first out-of-the-state mission trip. I'd been on mission trips in the U.S., but never outside the U.S., so it was my first one.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if you can talk about what happened just a few days before we left for that mission trip.
Oh, absolutely. Just right before we left, about a week before we left, actually, I got married. And we spent the money that we would have spent on our honeymoon. We talked it over and we decided we would, and prayed about it, that the Lord was leading us to use our honeymoon money to go on this mission trip. So we decided that we would do that, and the trip that we went on was split into two. Part of us was going to Guatemala, the other part was going into Belize. And so he stayed in Belize and I went on to Guatemala. So we were together but separate on our honeymoon.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's such an incredible story. I have met your husband, and he is amazing. And that's just an amazing story to tell, because I think that people struggle with going on mission trips. And in your case, you pretty much made that commitment that went along with being married.
Oh, right, yeah. And the Lord has blessed us through that in so many ways. I mean, even, through the trip and then after the trip, and even now, it's just, I can't even express how much God has blessed us through that.
Yeah. So could you talk a little bit about that crazy trip that we went on, where we flew into Belize City and the bus ride and all that just to get to Guatemala?
Oh, yeah. After we landed and we get on this bus, and I think it's a couple hours that we have to drive into the area that we're going. And on the way, the bus breaks down. So we're on this bus, and it's about dusk time. It's right about dark, and this is not an area where you want to break down in. It's kind of
sketchy.
Yes, it's very sketchy. That's a great word for it, sketchy.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, we had people pulling over telling us, you guys need to get off of this road before it gets dark. And come to find out what was wrong with the bus, it was missing one little piece. And so all we had with us was a little screwdriver tool, a handyman's tool.
Yeah.
And we had a man with us that was very handy. And so he was getting out there trying to fix it, but they needed a piece. A part had broken. And so we had a van behind us. So they went in the van and traveled another, I think, 30 to 45 minutes back into town.
To this mechanic shop, right?
Yes,
or something like that?
Yeah. The mechanic shop was closed. But they had kind of a junkyard there at the mechanic shop. So they get out and they just start digging through the junk. And then all of a sudden they see on the side this little piece. And so they pick it up. And
it was just laying on the ground.
It was just laying on the ground, just right there. And Chris, that piece is what they needed to fix the bus. I mean, that's just a God thing. I just get chills even now and tearing up even now just thinking about it, because what they didn't know is we were on the bus end, and when someone had told us, hey, you guys need to get off this road, we instantly had a group of people begin to pray. We had text some people back home to begin to pray, because we didn't know what to expect. And so here they come driving up, and they tell us, we found the part, just happened to be laying on the ground at the mechanic shop that was closed, just laying there. And that's a God thing.
Yeah.
God did that. So they got that piece. It didn't quite fit, so the guy handyman drilled it down, rubbed it down a little bit with a knife, fit perfectly. Bus started and off we went. And it was the brakes. It was the power brakes that had went out. So the piece.
Something kind of important.
Right, yeah. You need the brakes to stop. Yeah.
So we went from Belize City and we went to this Belize Training Center, which is in southern Belize, and then we stayed there a night, and then the team split off, and we crossed the ocean going to Guatemala, into northern Guatemala.
Right.
And that boat ride was a little bumpy and precarious going across there.
Right. Yes. Like, we were like soaking wet.
Yeah.
Some of us were soaking wet going over it.
The ones on the side of the boat.
Right.
Yeah.
The majority of us were soaking wet going over. But again, the whole time it's fun. We're like laughing and having a great time. You know, not really knowing what to expect. That in itself was a good experience getting there.
And do you remember that first village that we saw that next day?
Yes.
Yeah. So that trip was a little daunting to get to that village, and
Right.
I think I'm still recovering from it. Can you talk a little bit about how we had to get to that village?
Oh yeah. Well, first of all, the boat ride. You know, we
Yeah.
had it was about a 30-minute boat ride.
Through these little tributaries.
Right. Yeah.
And mangroves. I mean,
Right.
it was just,
it was crazy getting through there. It's like a scene in a movie that you know, and in fact, we're all sitting here talking about, you know, it kind of feels like you're in a movie and somebody's just going to jump out at any time, you know, but it was fun. But just seeing Guatemala in a different light, it's really a beautiful place.
Yeah.
You know, the greenery and the countryside. But then getting there, we walk about 15 minutes on flat land, and then we have a hike up a really treacherous hill. I mean, you think about a hill and you think, oh, nice green grass. No, this is a rocky, steep hill. I mean,
Yeah.
where you're literally sometimes on your hands and your feet walking up it. And so we get up, and then there's a little area where you have to cross a wooden bridge, or it's not even a bridge. It's like a
that was
plank.
that was no bridge.
It's a plank like about this
Yeah.
wide. So we're walking
Sideways.
right, we're walking across it, and what was neat is when we crossed over, there were these two little boys that met us. I don't know if you remember that
Yeah.
or not. There's two little boys met us, and we still had a ways to go, and at least another 40 minutes walk after that. That these little boys were excited about us coming, so they had met us there, and they didn't understand us, and we didn't understand them, but it was a bond already at that moment with those kids. And then you know, we finished the hike and the walk through there, but it was definitely a village that was remote, and so it was exciting to walk through there and to see. I wouldn't even call it, they call it their school, but it was I'm a teacher, and we're building a new school, you know.
Yeah.
A very beautiful school. And when they would told us this is with their school, my heart, you know, just sank, because this wasn't a school. This was, most people in America wouldn't even put their junk in this building.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't have air, no heat. I mean,
Do you remember
no
how hot
air.
how hot that was in
Oh,
there?
it was very hot. It had open windows. And what I remember is these teenage boys bringing, you know, there's little bitty windows like this,
Yeah.
and they just hovered around those windows just to see what we were, you know, bringing them, the filter that we were bringing them. They just wanted to see and look what
So
was
there
going
was
on.
several hundred people in that room,
Mm-hmm.
and then there had to be several hundred on the outside peering in through those little windows.
Oh, right, yeah. They had, the women and the children came inside, and it was super hot in there. No, I don't even think there was a breeze, because,
Yeah.
I mean, I got heat exhaustion in that room
Yeah.
that day. But these women with these infant babies and their children just packed in there. And then the men stood outside because there wasn't enough room for them, and then the teenage boys circled around. And I'm sure that's just, you know, the way they do things. But
Yeah.
but anyway, we were in there putting in the buckets and playing the music, and you know, us having a really neat bonding time with that, and them watching us do that. I mean, no one knew each other's language except the interpreter, but there was a bond already being created just by playing the Christian music and us singing along and putting the buckets together. That was one of my. There's many favorite parts I have, but that's one of my favorite.
So you had never been on a bucket ministry trip before, and so can you tell me about what you witnessed that first time of seeing a presentation, both the physical presentation on how to use the bucket and then transitioning into the gospel?
Sure. And if I could back up just a little bit,
Sure.
is that when you came to our church to show us the presentation and how we do it, my husband and I we hadn't even signed up for the trip at that point. We didn't, so we
Right.
didn't know.
Yeah, you didn't.
I didn't have a clue what the bucket ministry was,
Yeah.
or who you were or anything. We were just glad to be on the trip.
Amen.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. And so it was just neat how God transitioned that. In fact, in that very first village was the first time that I actually knew, oh, this is what we're here for. This is what's going on.
Yeah.
So, so after that long hike, and we get in there, and we're starting to do the presentation. You have the dirty water. You actually have them walk out with us,
Right.
to show them where you got the water from. And you went behind that little building and scooped up the water, and it was dirty water already, but then we, made it even muddier to get the point across.
Right.
So, in their mud, like were cows and whatever creatures, do their thing in that water that these people were drinking. And so that they would know, they walked out there with us and got the water and then walked back in. And it just to see how that little filter filters out into clean water. And I just remember sitting there, and it was my first time to see the presentation, my first time to even experience any of it. And, you're going through it, and I see the clean water, and it looks crystal clear, and then you start drinking it. And I'm like, I am not about to drink that water. No way, I am not. Because even though it's clear, I'm sure there's got to be something in there. And so, and then you pass it on to the next person, and I'm sitting right next to the person who's going to pass it. So I get up and I do. I'm embarrassed to say this, but I did. I walked around because I did not want to drink that water. I was like, I'm not doing that. And but as I stayed in there and watched, and now the presentation went on, I kind of started feeling guilty because I didn't. But the transition between the water and to watch those people, because I was watching the people, had their response, and to them it was like magic to see that filter at work, and that dirty, nasty water that they drink turning into this crystal clear water that is healthy, And I just remember one little boy, because I'm a teacher at heart, so I watch kids. So this one little boy, he's wanting to drink it. He's ready. And I think actually one person actually hands it to him, and he drinks it. And I remember thinking, how selfish of me, actually, because this little boy is willing to drink this water, And I think that's when the Lord really started touching my heart with the filter. And anyway, and then being able to share the gospel with that, and seeing that the transition with people from their lives to being able to share the gospel with them and the love of Jesus with them that some of them have never even heard before.
Yeah.
And it's just life-changing. It really is.
Yeah, it is always exciting, and it's even more exciting for me, for someone new, to be able to see this, because you've come back and you've been on fire. And on fire in a way that's hard to describe. So can you share some of your, you said favorite moments. Can you share some of your favorite moments of the trip?
Absolutely. One of my favorite moments is, the Lord has been softening my heart for the last few months. And He's used this mission trip to change my heart in many ways.
Yeah.
And one of the ways is it was one of the last villages we had went to, and that morning before we left, the Holy Spirit was saying, I want you, Tori, to share. Everybody has a story, and everybody has a story to tell. And I remember the Lord just saying, I want you to tell Chris your story. I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. No way. And all through the day, he was like, I want you to tell Chris your story. And I was like, okay, God, if I have an opportunity to sit down with Chris today, then I'll tell him my story. And so I didn't come close to you all day. Wherever you went, I was the opposite. I mean, I stayed, you were north, I was south, you were east, I was west. And I kept an eye on you all day because I was not going to, that opportunity was not going to happen. I was going to make sure. And we had just left the village and we're getting into the boat. And I watched you to see where you sit, so I can sit totally opposite.
And this was like a 9 or 10 person boat.
Yes, it was a great
So
big
you
boat.
had ample space to get away from me.
Yes, very much space. There was probably about, I would say, 10 to 12 of us in this boat. And so you sat on one end and I sat on the other end because I knew there's no way. There's about 4 people in between us. And so we get going and the boat is heavy. It's more heavy on one side than the other. So we're going, and the guy slows down the boat, and he says something in the language, and the translator's like, "Hey guys, you guys are gonna have to switch." And I'm like, "I'm not. I'm staying right here." And so I remember you switch with somebody. You two switch. I'm thinking, "Okay, God, this is see." So we're going a little further, another 2 or 3 minutes down the river, and he's like, "We're gonna have to switch again. The boat's still off kilter." And so I remember he points right at me. He said, "You are going to have to switch." And I said, so we switch, and I am sitting right next to you. And I don't even wait because I know if I wait, I'm not going to say anything. So instantly you look and you say, "Well, how's your day going?" And I was like, "Well, it's funny that you ask." And then I began to share with you that what the Lord had laid on my heart, and I began to share with you my story, and through the process of that, me being able to tell you, how God has been changing my heart. It all started through this bucket ministry, and me just saying yes to a mission trip that led to, children and adults having clean water, that allowed me to share something that the Lord had laid on my heart to soften my heart. So it's not by coincidence that we found that peace that we needed for the bus to get to where we needed to go. It wasn't by coincidence that the Lord laid on my husband's heart to use our money, our honeymoon money, to go on a mission trip. That wasn't coincidence. It wasn't coincidence that, we just happened to sit, the boat had to be shifted so we could go, so I could sit next to you. This has been a life-changing experience for me.
Well, and it has for me too, because like I mentioned before, you came back fired up, and in a way that we as a ministry have never seen before, because it's not really a day that goes by that you don't text me and say, "Hey, what can I do? What can I be involved with?" And I think that what you experienced on the trip and how He worked in your heart has brought you to this ministry, and will continue to use you to be able to share the mission of this ministry even further. And I really think that you and your husband will be trip leaders at Flint, and will take many, many more trips using this tool to reach more people for Christ. But He had to get you on this first one to get to that point, right?
Right, exactly, yeah. And it's changed his life too. He hasn't done anything but talk about it the whole time. In fact, he's has set up in another church. They're doing a night where they're having a missions-oriented thing for one generation leading the younger generation for men. And he's already, talking about us setting up a booth there and talking to you and seeing if we could do that. And anyway, he's on fire with it.
That's awesome. Well, Toy, thank you so much for sharing your story, and I just thank you for being so open to say yes, and say yes on at a moment where most people would be in Hawaii or wherever enjoying their honeymoon, but your honeymoon was on the mission field. So I thank you for saying yes to that, and I really, really loved hearing your story, and I'm going to be even more interested in seeing how you and David are written into the rest of this story.
Yeah. Well, thank you. We're excited to see where God leads us with it.
Yeah, thank you.